Throughout the semester, we have discussed international business. This presentation by Bray, Wesley, Tasha, and Mike recaps what we have learned thus far about doing business internationally, as well as includes some comparisons to domestic business strategy. As trade barriers relax, small business operators are starting to grow their businesses by expanding into global markets. But the differences between global and domestic markets, differences in culture and language, competitive practices, raw material supply chains, manufacturing and product specifications, logistics and political and legal systems, affect the way companies operate overseas. But what are these differences? How significant are they, and how do they impact businesses who decide to enter foreign markets? Domestic business is doing business at home. This means the currency, customs, laws, regulations, culture, and language are all familiar and more readily accessible to and understandable by the business manager. With international business, you lose the home team advantage. The exchange of goods, services, and investments in foreign nations can mean having to play by a whole different set of rules than what you are accustomed to. The strategies and lessons you might have learned as a business manager at home do not necessarily apply in alien territory. Some of the major differences include culture, market intelligence, level of competition, national political and legal systems, the application of international law, access to technology, logistics, and media. No two cultures are identical, and assuming or acting as if they are can mean very expensive missteps when entering international markets. To enter the international market, one has to understand how business is done in the host country, as well as the strategic involvement of the company's involvement or lack thereof in international trade activities. This means asking tough questions before investing the capital expenditures to move into a new market. Questions like, what happens if I don't expand internationally? Are there competitive advantages or disadvantages of remaining domestic with the product? Will the actions of competitors impact the business if the company remains domestic? What risks will I face if I expand internationally? How do these risks differ from the risks I face if I expand domestically? Are there political, business, financial, or cultural risks? What are they? How would they impact foreign and domestic sales? Can these risks be overcome? How? How specifically do you get the product into the hands of the consumer? This right here is the last mile. What are all the last steps I will need to take in order to get the products in the hand of the end user? Is there a reasonable expectation that this can be done? Will going international create value for the company? That is, does the cost of selling the product in another country exceed the expected return? Can you get paid? How? What happens if you don't get paid? Do you have recourse? Can you get the money in US dollars? If not, can you use the money in foreign currency? Are there potential blind spots or pitfalls? Are there things you can't anticipate? Do you have sufficient buffers in your plan to allow for things you can't predict? Each of these questions must be answered thoroughly by business managers contemplating an expansion strategy as part of their due diligence. The first difficulty is realizing that replicating domestic success abroad is not easy. Even the ability to perform due diligence is significantly more challenging in a foreign setting than it is in the familiar domestic backyard. Understand that simply trying to plug and play a tried and true domestic strategy abroad without paying attention to what can go wrong is a recipe for financial loss that may or may not sink an entire business. The best decision regarding international expansion may to be not expand. Companies feel lured by the huge upside potential of foreign markets, but the first question they often ask is, can we expand there? Rather than, should we expand there? Domestic business strategies rely heavily on performing due diligence, but the stakes are significantly higher on accurately evaluating prospects internationally. We've discussed the importance of due diligence during the course, but it's worth revisiting a few topics in comparing domestic versus international strategies. First, we start with looking at the base company with a local presence. Such a company needs to look heavily into its supply chain and distribution channel and decide whether it is pursuing a cost leadership or production differentiation price strategy. Once it has established itself in local markets, companies generally begin expanding domestically. At this point, the company can usually build on its existing local strategies, as well as look at how things will differ locally and in other domestic markets. For instance, a restaurant may need to add an item or two to its selection to accommodate different local tastes. Another issue is state law. For example, a cannabis producer or gaming company may not be able to expand or offer the same products or services domestically to certain states based on their laws. In many cases, when expanding domestically, companies are able to piggyback off of local strategies with minor adjustments. Expanding internationally, however, requires a reassessment of all the local and domestic items mentioned previously, along with many additional components such as market potential, market access, payment sources, cultural differences, and dispute resolution. Does the potential market have enough disposable income to support demand? If one was only familiar with doing business in the U.S., there could be a paradigm to break of market size equating to market demand. There are numerous potential barriers that international businesses may encounter that they would not find at home, such as restrictive laws, tariffs, and quotas. Many businesses have altered their goods or services to meet the tastes of markets abroad. Managing a supply chain that crosses national borders can be a real challenge. The cost, time, and geographical distance must all be considered when forming an international strategy. This may also guide the decision on if a firm wishes to export or invest directly. If business risks are not accurately assessed, the cost to the firm attempting to expand internationally could be catastrophic. For example, can you trust that you will receive payment from an international partner? You may not have the U.S. legal system as a backstop. Will you have to market your product differently? How will you determine your pricing strategy? Or for that matter, would you even decide to occupy the same spot on the value curve as you currently do domestically? Why would a perfectly successful company want to leave the safety and comfort of its own domestic market? First, there's the promise of domestic markets. There's a limited market size in the domestic marketplace. 96% of the world's consumers are outside of the U.S. Developing a successful international strategy offers a chance of increasing sales. Then there's diversification. By remaining domestic, you subject your company to a greater risk of cyclical trends having a large impact of your overall profitability. Compared to isolating the business to only the domestic region, diversifying sales regions or operations can create safety for a company by lessening the impact of geocyclical trends. Also, there's access to talent. Domestic markets have a relatively limited talent pool. International labor can offer companies advantages that they might not be able to find at home. For example, when Netflix expanded to Amsterdam, the company praised the city for providing a talent pool of multilingual and internationally minded employees who help the company understand consumers and cultures all across Europe. There's also a competitive advantage. By being the first of your competitors to expand internationally, competitors can gain a first mover advantage in building brand awareness and attempt to build a moat to ward off other potential market entrants. There's the exposure to foreign investment opportunities. Foreign markets can open up additional investment opportunities that would otherwise be unavailable to them domestically. Regardless of why a company chooses to become multinational, and regardless to what extent they do, the underlying cause is all about the bottom line. Will the firm make more money by adopting an international strategy? While quantifying this question may be difficult, it should ultimately be the driving force behind the stay or go decision. So what are some of the ways a company can expand business domestically? Vertically, a domestic company can continue growing without international expansion by becoming its own supplier, distributor, retailer, etc. It can horizontally integrate by purchasing its domestic competitors. There's also product line expansion. Companies can grow through creating a greater depth or breadth of its existing products and target them at its existing customers, penetrate a new customer demographic, or concentrate on a niche market. Chances are there are still locations domestically that a company can expand into, and that is an option to keep open when thinking about domestic or international. It is not always the case that one has to do business internationally or cease growing. There are many ways to grow domestically and internationally. So what ways can a company do business internationally? Each of the previously mentioned domestic expansion opportunities still exist in an international context. On top of these strategies are the three main ways companies operate in an international space. One is exports. Generally, the first step businesses take when beginning to expand internationally, it comes about when they see there's enough demand for their product outside of domestic borders. Number two is import. This takes place when a business in another country can provide a product or service cheaper or more effectively than the company can produce on their own or domestically. Third is foreign direct investment. This is when a company invests in business interests located in another country, usually through opening a location of their own in that country or acquiring ownership or controlling interest in a foreign company. Here are a few marketing strategies a business might evaluate when considering how to enter a foreign market. First is standard, also known as mass marketing. It is where the company sells exactly the same product everywhere, assuming they will not need to make adjustments for different markets. The simplest and most cost-effective method, the only thing they have to change is the language or marketing material and packaging. Examples include products like toothpaste, gasoline, or milk. The second is concentrated. The company decides to concentrate on one market or product segment. This could be when a company like Yum! Brands chooses to have KFC and Pizza Hut restaurants in China, but not Taco Bell, or when a company like Rolex decides to focus specifically on the high-end luxury watches instead of the watch market as a whole. It allows for specialization on a certain market segment, but is risky since you are less diversified if demand for that product decreases. The third is differentiated. This is when a company's product cannot be sold in different countries for reasons such as not being compatible with the local culture, so they create products specific to local markets. Examples of companies using this strategy are McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, and Nike, which all have products catering to local markets. This is the most expensive option, but can increase brand loyalty and allows a company to succeed in a place where it wouldn't be able to without changing their products. Successes and failures. Netflix is an example of a company that has been very successful in their international expansion. They first expanded into Canada in 2010, and since then are in over 190 countries. They were initially cautious, making sure they fully understood international expansion in Canada before expanding quicker into 50 countries, and then taking one last jump to about 200 countries. At every step, Netflix made sure it had the technological capability and cultural knowledge to successfully bring its product into each foreign country it entered. This made market research very important as well because each country had its own streaming law, and many already had established streaming providers Netflix had to compete with. This success has led them to having international streaming revenues higher than the domestic streaming revenues for the first time in 2018. Groupon's attempt at expansion into China has not gone nearly as well as other locations for a couple of reasons. First off is that they assumed their business model was a one-size-fits-all model that could work anywhere. This led to them not researching the market fully and being hurt in a number of ways for it. They tried to implement the strategy of offering high salaries to lure competitors' best employees that had worked in Europe, but those companies threatened employees with not being hired anywhere else if they left. They also didn't know about the standard profit split for these types of companies, or that mass emails are not very effective with Chinese consumers. Groupon also did not use enough people with local market knowledge, instead relying on expats that clearly did not understand how to succeed with that business in China. It resulted in them having to close many Chinese locations and fire hundreds of staff. Not understanding international business nuances can lead to financial losses. When a business is only doing business domestically, there are less risks to think about. So not taking the time to learn about local markets when expanding internationally can lead to large financial losses. Local customs and politics are large factors in this. Not understanding them can lead to poor perception by local customers or the breaking of laws that hurt the business. Exchange rate risk is also a factor when dealing with foreign currency. If you aren't either hedged with something like a futures contract or protected through your contract with the customer, the fluctuation of currency exchange rates can lead to financial losses. International business incorporates every aspect of domestic business, like a domestic plus strategy, because there's so much to add on top of everything that was established domestically. When deciding between doing international business or domestic, you need to keep in mind each have their own values, risks, and opportunities. With a domestic company, you know the culture and laws inside and out, and internationally, chances are you won't. So the more questions you ask when expanding internationally, the better. International business calls for a reassessment of domestic strategies with a myriad of added difficulties and potential upsides to it.